To be honest, I am still just totally on a high from our 1-year anniversary party from last week.
I can't believe that we also had real listeners come to our party this time, because the first party we had was a launch party. We hadn't even started the pod yet.
Exactly. So we had literally 0 listeners, but it was so crazy. I mean, thank you guys so much to all of those who attended, and especially thank you to all of the people that flew out. We had people from the Bay Area. We had people from Washington, D.C., New York, San Francisco. San Francisco's the Bay Area, but you know what I mean. Very, very excited.
It was so awesome to have such a great sense of community present at our party. We had over 200 guests, which blew our minds. Thank you guys so much. Honestly, this show would not be possible without all of you guys tuning in every week. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yes, we love you, GlowJob fam.
Welcome to GlowJob, the beauty podcast that's more than skin deep. We're the only podcast to make you hotter and smarter.
All right, GlowJob fam, the first news story of this week. Peter Thomas Roth was named in the Epstein files. In recently released documents, Peter Thomas Roth appeared 50 times in email correspondence involving Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. From here on out, we're going to refer to Peter Thomas Roth as PTR. Following Epstein's 2007 arrest, PTR said that he and his wife knew that he did nothing wrong and will always love him and be his best friend forever. Even after Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008, PTR still stayed in touch with him for over a decade later, apparently sending gift bags to Epstein and his team. And he even stayed in contact with him through 2018 and up all the way until Epstein was arrested in 2019.
So what was interesting after this is that PTR and the team officially did release a statement. And in the statement, he basically said that Epstein was his physics teacher in high school back in New York, where he attended Dalton. And he basically maintained a relationship with his physics teacher for the next 50 years. But Roth stated that, he never acted inappropriately. He never went to any parties. He never saw any girls. He never went to the island, etc. And he also noted that he was in disbelief that Epstein could actually commit such heinous crimes. He expressed a lot of, sentiment and empathy for the victims, and just announced that he was gravely, gravely mistaken. But, with all that being said, when you hear the response and then go and reread the emails and also just kind of backdate them to where things happened, there were some instances where it was potentially difficult to actually believe, because there was one instance where there was a salacious headline about Jeffrey Epstein. And what PTR ended up doing was he sent that headline to Jeffrey Epstein with a joking response saying, "Oh, this is a great photo of you." So, it's kind of hard to believe that when this is what the actual emails are saying.
So that article that he sent to Epstein, I believe was a New York Post article where they referenced Epstein as a quote unquote and also mentioned the sex island scandal revolving around Epstein. And so that kind of joke contradicts the tone of his statement that he was in complete disbelief. And so I think this is where a lot of consumers aren't reconciling PTR's statement with the emails that they're reading in the files.
And the reason why this matters in today's landscape is that, we talk about it all the time, but founder-led brands like Peter Thomas Roth, that's literally his name. It is his brand. But the founders are kind of inseparable at this point, right? And what they say and what they do really does communicate to consumers what their morals are, what their practices are, and what they stand for. And skincare, beauty, any type of consumer-led brand is always going to be an emotional purchase when people are thinking about, where do I want to buy my skin cream from, that kind of thing.
And so this comes at a really crazy time, because obviously just a few weeks ago, we had Ryan Roth, PTR's son, and the brand's director of media on GlowJob for an interview. A lot of you guys reached out asking us about this headline story, because obviously this is such big news. What are your thoughts, Jules, on the fact of this family? Obviously, it's a family-run business. The father, Peter Thomas Roth, is the face and the one implicated in the situation. I've been on TikTok and I've noticed a lot of folks commenting on Ryan's TikTok, asking him to make a statement on behalf of the brand and on behalf of his father. What do you think about the responsibility for someone like that, for Ryan?
I mean, it's such a difficult situation. He's so young. He's still in his 20s. And just having all of this like public demand and outcry against your father, I can't even imagine how I would feel in a situation like that. And, what should he do? He is a public figure. He has almost 500,000 followers on TikTok. But I think that as of this point, he probably has so much more to deal with on his plate than to give a public response, right? Because just dealing with those like personal family relationships, I think he needs to figure that out first and kind of really understand where his morals are, where his values are, everything that matters to him on a personal level before he goes and just takes to social media, for a response.
I agree. I think in this day and age, everyone demands information like now, which is so unreasonable sometimes because I'm like, there's a lot going on in a person's life. Plus, sometimes when I think about it, like, gosh, if I'm thinking about like if my dad did something bad and then everyone pointed the finger at me, I don't know if that's necessarily fair, right? Like your father or your parent, anyone, your family member, they're independent of you. Of course, they're related to you and that's a big impact, but what they choose to do doesn't mean it's correlated exactly to what you choose to do.
Yeah. And it's really crazy and it's terrifying, like all of these historical associations, even these indirect ones. But, those types of things, they can resurface and really just impact consumer trust years later at this point. Like it's been almost a decade since their last moment of interaction.
It's crazy how many people have been implicated in the Epstein file drop and the fact that only 50% of the files have been released so far. So you guys, we're going to stay on top of this. And as this story unfolds, that GlowJob is going to be here to report on it.
Next up in the headlines, I am so excited to talk about this one, but it is, let's just call it Pen 15 Gate. The Willie Gate, right? That is happening in the Olympics over in Milano Cortina right now. But allegedly, male Olympic ski jumpers are injecting their genitals with hyaluronic acid filler in order to get an advantage during this ski competition. To break it down, in February of 2026, this month, the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, began investigating claims that male ski jumpers are artificially altering their genitals. And the allegation suggests that they inject things like maybe hyaluronic acid or maybe paraffin into their general area before the athletes have to go and do their pre-body scans. And normally WADA is testing for things like steroid use or other like performance enhancing drugs. And so when you inject all of this filler into this area, effectively what it does is it makes it larger. But the rule for all of these ski jumpers is that the suit that you wear during the competition, it can only be 4 centimeters, which is a teeny tiny amount, but 4 centimeters larger than your actual body. So by giving yourself even a tiny advantage in that area, it allows you to wear a larger suit. And so when you think about it, when these skiers, they're skiing down a hill, they hit this ramp, and then they are gliding through the air for as long and for as far as possible. You can kind of imagine it as like a flying squirrel, but that extra fabric, that extra advantage, it basically acts as a mini sail, really helping them get more lift as well as more distance.
Wow. Okay. There are so many things to unpack here with Pen 15 Olympic Gate because of all the places to put extra space, that is a fascinating choice to go down there.
I wonder, why do you think they picked the genital area? Part of me thinks is like, when you spread your legs to actually ski, like that area does make sense to want to expand. But I don't know, do you think there are other reasons why?
I think that is a really good reason right there is when your legs are spread out, you create a little gusset if there's extra fabric. It creates a quite literal sail. You have more surface area because anywhere else, I'm trying to think, maybe like under the armpits is the only other place, but I don't know how ski jumpers jump, if they keep their arms to their side or if they open.
They keep them directly on their sides as close to the body as possible. And then they spread the legs as wide as possible.
Oh, this is why. They need to create the sail. It's the most probable place to add extra space.
And so it's really wild here because WADA, this anti-doping association, they never have actually mentioned that hyaluronic acid filler is a banned substance. And it's probably because they never even considered it Right? Like who would ever think in a million years that people would be injecting their genitalia with hyaluronic acid filler? But they do have a clause in here where that anything like this, right? Like using some type of, injection to get an advantage, it goes against the quote unquote spirit of the sport. So even though hyaluronic acid is not technically banned, this whole activity definitely is not that sportsmanlike.
No, this is called cheating. Definitely, definitely cheating. Very creative cheating. Honestly, whoever thought of this, I got to give them an A for effort in terms of creativity.
Yeah, but let's just break down the implications or complications that can actually arise from doing this. Because I feel like, when this headline came out, I'm sure there were a lot of curious men or curious teen boys who were Googling, how they can get their hands on some hyaluronic acid filler.
So injecting hyaluronic acid into your pen 15 area is considered a non-surgical cosmetic procedure, and it's used primarily to increase girth. And it's generally considered safer than any sort of permanent filler, but it does carry specific physical and medical risks, generally due to the sensitivity of that anatomical area.
Right. So let's just break down some of the immediate and common effects. And I'll just start with the first one, but obviously swelling and bruising. That must really not be fun on such a sensitive area. But, there's always going to see that. We see it when it happens to women when they're injecting filler into their lips.
And that swelling and bruising usually subsides within 1 to 2 weeks. So maybe these guys think it's okay, they can deal with it. Another common side effect is pain and discomfort. So you're going to experience temporary soreness or tenderness, which is very common, for at least the first 48 hours. And some men report discomfort during erections because the filler creates tension in the skin.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And then the last one is pretty much the most obvious one, but it's any kind of aesthetic change. So when you inject something like hyaluronic acid into that area, the results are going to be visible immediately. And it's going to really give that, full appearance, whether you are flaccid or in an erect state.
Doing research for this has just been so wild because I've been just seeing all this commentary about it. And, speaking of young men looking up hyaluronic acid filler down there, I have seen people on threads, like Reddit threads and on TikTok, asking how long this stuff lasts. And people are just kind of egging each other on. They're like, it lasts a while. It can last for months.
That's crazy. And I believe it. But I think my favorite versions of recaps of this story have been the physicists who have chimed in because these physicists, I don't know if they're doctors. I would kind of hope that they're not, but they are literally doing the math behind what that kind of advantage in the suit area can actually give a professional ski jumper. And some of these reports are saying that, with that added suit area, surface area, you can get almost 5.8 extra meters on your jump. And to me, that's the difference between silver and bronze or silver and gold. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's actually substantial. No wonder why these guys are doing this.
Yes, but just to close things out, yes, this story, it has not been proven true yet. Again, WADA is just, they're still investigating. I really, really, really want them to catch somebody just because I need to know who's crazy enough to do it. But most importantly, we got to end this with that just a warning for all of our listeners out there or curious men that the FDA does not approve fillers for any type of Pen 15 enhancement. I think we got to say that just to be responsible.
Next up in news, Clorox pays big to stay clean, and they have acquired Purell maker GlowJob for $2.25 billion. Speaking of billions, last year felt like the billion year. It looks like it's carrying on into 2026 too. But Clorox has agreed to acquire GlowJob Industries, which is a family-owned company behind Purell, and they purchased it for $2.25 billion in cash. GlowJob, which is based in Akron, Ohio, has spent over 80 years building Purell into the dominant hand sanitizer brand that it is today, and they generate roughly $800 million in annual revenue. Purell still holds the number one share position in hand sanitizer across all of the B2B and retail channels, and now Purell will sit alongside Clorox staples like Burt's Bees, Pine Sol, and Brita.
So whenever I think about a brand like Purell, it's almost like they are defining a category in a way. It's kind of like, when you want a tissue, you can ask someone, do you have a Kleenex? Or if you want to look something up online, you are told to go Google it, right? Like it really is this kind of defining thing. But this still shows category ownership, not trendiness. And that is what's really commanding these premium valuations here because, honestly, yeah, Purell is really unsexy to say the least, right? Like it's in hospitals, it's in elevators. My building has a Purell dispenser next to our trash chutes, right? But it's like this idea of like trust and habit. And I think, all of what happened during 2020 and COVID, it really just created this like infrastructure level branding that, is obviously worth billions and billions of dollars.
I feel like health and wellness is definitely top of mind for almost every single consumer. I'm thinking also about how Touchland got acquired last year by Church & Dwight for $880 million. That was a wild transaction for these cutesy little hand sanitizers.
Yeah. And, I wouldn't be surprised if Clorox now takes Purell and honestly goes and makes those same exact hand sanitizers. I think, that's the type of interesting moves you're going to see a brand make now that it has new ownership. Next in news, Live Tinted, the color cosmetics brand, they just raised capital in a kind of interesting situation, but it's a rare joint venture between L'Oreal and Unilever. In January of 2026, they got investment from both the L'Oreal's Bold venture firm as well as Unilever Ventures. And we really haven't seen a lot of times where both of these companies are going in at the same time. But this funding round included lead investor from Curate Capital and their existing backer, Monogram Capital Partners, which is huge in the beauty space. But it was made at more than a double of the brand's 2023 Series A valuation. So here, they're really going to get that support that they need to expand global retail, as well as develop even more beauty and inclusive beauty products.
And so they did not disclose the current valuation of Live Tinted, but the fact that these two venture arms of some of the biggest CPG brands, L'Oreal and Unilever, came in on here shows that they have a lot of backing coming into this year. And so this is signaling that inclusive beauty isn't just a niche anymore. It's actually considered a core growth strategy for these strategics. And so it shows that Live Tinted has crossed over from that quote unquote like mission driven startup into more of a category defining brand. And it's also reflecting a shift towards smarter, later stage bets rather than just the spray and pray venture investing of 2018.
This makes me really excited because when I think of other, inclusivity focused brands, I'm thinking of brands like Edam, brands like Colfi, brands like Topicals, and seeing the success of all of these brands makes me really, really happy because one of the things that made me really, really sad last year was the closing of Coli. So I feel like inclusivity really isn't going anywhere, but now investors and brands are just going to be a lot smarter about how they do it.
Do you remember last year when we had Yu Chen, the founder of Orsay Cosmetics, on? And she was telling us how when she first started her brand, which is specifically creating foundation shades for Asian skin tones, that a lot of folks that she spoke to in terms of finding early investors, they all looked at her and were like, why are you going so niche? Why are you trying to just focus on this one demographic of people that are being underserved? And she's like, do you not hear what you're saying? And it's interesting now to see that strategics and VCs are realizing, oh, wait, actually, this is an area we should be investing in because it's been an underserved category and these people are hungry to buy.
Exactly. And specifically with Live Tinted and their founder, Deepika Mutala, like she was a big beauty guru on YouTube way before she launched the brand. And what she was always really famous for is, she's Indian American, so of, Southeast Asian descent. And she has like these kind of hereditary, like dark circles underneath her eyes. And so her big thing is that she would take this drag technique of applying lipstick under the area, like a red lipstick, and using that as a color corrector. Because as we know, drag queens did invent that, right? They'd be using red lipstick to kind of cancel out any type of 5 o'clock shadow that they would get. But so the first product that Live Tinted created was a color corrector. So clearly there is this huge demand of like newer products like this popping up. And I don't know, I'm really excited. I want to see more of this.
So do I. And also the dark under eye circles is a big issue with melanin rich folks. Like, I mean, I'm not that melanin rich, but As a Fitzpatrick 3/4, I have the crazy dark under eye circles, and it's such a pain in the butt. So products like these, they're actually applicable to a lot of different people and a lot of different skin tones. Next up in news, matte lipstick is back, but this time it's an upgrade. So matte lips are officially having a comeback moment, and we're seeing it everywhere on the red carpet, but it's not the same dry, cracking liquid matte lip of 2016. The new generation formulas that we're seeing from brands like Fyre and Violette FR, they focus on creamier textures, rich pigments, longer wear, and more nuanced color stories. So a lot of pro makeup artists are saying that matte has been re-engineered for the modern skin expectations.
What I love about all of this is that it just confirms this thing that we all know is that trends don't die, they always come back, right? They evolve. And so I think consumers, they now are so well accustomed to like juicy, hydrated lip. They're still going to want all of those qualities when it comes to a matte lip product. And so now with all of these new innovations and new technology available, we are finally able to meet like the matte lip expectation of what consumers actually want in a product. Like I can't even count how many times I had like that cracky lip issue. But then like, how do you fix it? Like ideally you would fix it by putting a gloss on top of it, but that kind of, cancels out the desired effect. But, some of it still is very, very true and nostalgic to like that whole 2016 trend. So who knows? Like, do you think that the matte lip is tied to this 2016 resurgence?
I think a little bit, right? It's like you said, trends are cyclical and it all makes sense that it's coming back now. But it's timed well with the fact that we now finally have better formulas. Like the Violette FR, that like matte lip that they have, I bought one of them and honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the formula. I'm not like a matte lip girly because even back in 2016 when the matte lip thing was a trend, I was that silly girl who would then use lip gloss on top because I was like, it feels too dry. So I completely defeated the point of the look. But I really like their formulas for Violette FR.
Next, I am so excited because this is kind of a recurring segment for us, but the curse of Forbes 30 under 30 has officially struck again. So here, federal prosecutors have charged Gökçe Güven, founder of fintech startup Calder, with a multi-million-dollar securities fraud, wire fraud, visa fraud, and identity theft. And they're basically alleging that she has been fabricating the financials of her company. She has been exaggerating partnerships, saying that she has customers as well as clients and users on her app or platform that she did not have. And she used all of that, all of those claims to essentially raise over $7 million. And then she reused that money to then obtain a US O1A, aka the Extraordinary Ability Visa, which is absolutely insane. But, she was featured on last year, 2025, their Forbes 30 under 30 list. And I believe they are going after her for, I think, 52 years in jail here.
Wow, that's a really long time. Prosecutors are cracking down on these kinds of fraud cases now. And this is why it matters, because Forbes 30 under 30 curse is literally that. It's a curse because there is a track record. So let's run off the hall of shame for the Forbes 30 under 30 curse. And the first one we're going to talk about is Martin Shkreli of Turing Pharmaceuticals. He was class of 2013 for the Forbes 30 under 30 list. You guys might remember this way back in the day, but he served time for securities fraud after running his companies like a Ponzi scheme. Martin, the farmer bro, he was also known for doing some pretty shisty things. He purposely inflated life-saving drugs like HIV medication to the point that it became so astronomically unaffordable for people. And then obviously he got served for a bunch of securities fraud later on.
And I know that he's just a bad dude because I remember where he bought like the original discography for this one Wu-Tang album just so that nobody else could listen to it.
He was such a little head, honestly, and everyone hated him for good reason.
Seriously. But next up, we have our girl, Elizabeth Holmes, who is staying as blonde as ever in prison right now. But in 2015, she wasn't officially like 30 under 30, but she was a keynote speaker for the Forbes 30 under 30 summit. But, obviously with Theranos, there was a ton of fraud saying that there's this, little finger prick that can cure all blood, diagnostic issues, just simplifying the healthcare and medical system for everybody, which was just, again, a flop.
Next up on the list, Billy McFarland, best known for Fyre Festival. In 2017, McFarlane made the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for Fyre Media, the media company behind the very well-known festival. But McFarlane was later sentenced to 6 years in federal prison in 2018 for wire fraud, bank fraud, and misleading investors, resulting in over $26 million in losses. And then he was released from prison early in 2022.
Next up, we have Charlie Javis Frank, and she was Forbes 30 Under 30 for the class of 2019. And she was convicted of defrauding JP Morgan Chase by allegedly fabricating over 4 million fake user accounts to secure a $175 million acquisition. Can you imagine how many bots she had to go and build to get to 4 million?
This honestly looks so bad on JP Morgan because they're the ones who are supposed to be doing that due diligence to make sure that the price is reflective of the actual value of the company. And they should have been able to spot all those 4 million fake users. There's a lot of people who clearly didn't do their job right here, but obviously Charlie really effed up. Next up on the Hall of Shame, Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX, and also his girlfriend, Carolyn Ellison. So Sam made the class of 2021 Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Caroline was not technically on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, but obviously is very much tied to this whole scandal. Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in prison for orchestrating an $8 billion fraud that collapsed the cryptocurrency exchange FTX.
And lastly, another one of the 2021 classmates is Joanna Smith Griffin, and she was also charged for fraud. So much freaking fraud here, just fraud, fraud, fraud. And allegedly, she was lying to her investors for her company, All Here Education, to secure $10 million in funding. So my question here is, why don't they vet people? Why doesn't Forbes spend more time vetting people? It's kind of crazy how many of these guys are ending up in jail.
I think the reason why they can't vet them thoroughly enough is that they don't have access to their financial documents. You know, it's not like it's a bank doing due diligence to see whether or not they should be investing in them or acquiring them. And then in that process, you need to send financials over to be evaluated. For, a press piece, I mean, this is going to sound a little mean, but it is a little bit of a fluff piece, right? It's just nice PR. They just need to talk to a bunch of different folks, interview them, write a pretty little copy to add on to their headshot, and out it goes into the world. They should now consider having a more diligent process of vetting people because that is a very extensive list.
I know the way Forbes 30 Under 30 works right now is that you need 2 people to recommend you who were previously on the list. So it's kind of like a if you know who's who kind of game, like a lot of networking. But yeah, I think they got to add a due diligence person into the mix here.
Next up in news, Ballerina Farm pauses their raw milk sales after failing safety tests. Influencer-run Ballerina Farms, which is run by influencers Hannah and Daniel Nealman, have halted their raw milk operations after failing 2 safety tests by the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. In these tests, they found high levels of coliform bacteria, which is a type of bacteria that includes E. coli. And so while the CDC has long warned against unpasteurized dairy due to bacterial risk, the brand has not ruled out resuming sales in the future. A spokesperson for Ballerina Farms has said that they have learned, quote unquote, the hard way about the infrastructure needed for raw milk production and that their current dairy is better suited for pasteurized products.
I was so happy to see this headline come to fruition because I've never really been a fan of unpasteurized milk because it's such a big part of the Maha movement because everybody knows Ballerina Farm for being queen of the Maha, right? She is queen trad wife. But I always love thinking about the lore behind her as well as her husband, Daniel Nealman.
What's the lore?
Okay, so buckle up because this is a wild one. So before they met, Hannah was this Juilliard-trained ballerina living the high life in New York City. And she met Daniel Nealman, who is the heir to the JetBlue fortune. His dad is the founder of JetBlue, who is a billionaire. So, the 2 start dating, they get married, and pretty early on, she realizes that she's going to have to give up her dream of being a prima ballerina and live with Daniel. But what does he want? He wants trad life, right? That's all he wants. So they move to this farm. There's a lot of rumors are they Mormon? Are they not Mormon? I don't know. But what I do know is that they have a crazy amount of children. I think they have between 6 and 10. You're going to have to... No, it's like, it's a lot. Like, honestly, anything above 5, I just stopped counting. But so she has like all of these children. She homeschools all of them. And she also raises, all of these cows on a farm. And she is like the complete definition of a homesteader. She churns her own butter. She bakes her own bread. She runs her like multi-million fan base on TikTok. And she also runs Ballerina Farms. Isn't that crazy?
The JetBlue background is wild. I did not know this.
Yes, it is. And so like that is kind of what, probably is funding this big farm that they have in Utah, because they just have hundreds and hundreds of acres of property out here.
Wow. I have a JetBlue credit card and I'm pretty loyal to JetBlue and United. Those are my 2 preferred airlines. I did not realize my money was going to help support Ballerina Farms. Jeez.
Yeah. Like, I feel like people forget that part of her story because they hide it really well, because the way that they live, you would not expect that he is the heir of a billionaire. No. Even though it might sound glamorous, having this like trad life wife, her life is hard. She's waking up, she's feeding the chicken, she's feeding the horses, she's teaching all of her 6 to 10 children.
I love that it's arranged somewhere in there. Do you drink raw milk?
No, that is literally just like Maha propaganda in my mind. So like basically when it comes to all these people that are like pro raw milk, what they're basically saying is that there are all of these like nutrients and all of these benefits of drinking milk raw. And when you go through the process of pasteurizing the milk, which is usually heat treating it to make it safe and kill off bacteria like E. coli, it loses a lot of vitamins and nutrients in that process. But I don't know, like I believe in science. I believe in, respecting and following the CDC. And as someone who has once had E. coli, I would not wish that on my worst enemy.
Fair. That is so fair. E. coli is bad. Not that I've ever had it, but I've heard your story and I do not want to repeat that in my life ever.
Should we get really personal and recount that story?
Yeah, let's do it.
I feel like we have to, because this just goes to show like how gnarly E. coli was. But okay. It was 3 years ago in Cabo, Mexico. And, I was at the country club that my parents are a part of, and we had Thanksgiving dinner and we had this beautiful artisanal farm to table salad. And every single person in the club the next day got E. coli. And they traced it back to like a single lettuce farmer in Cabo in the area. But yeah, so it wasn't just our country club, but it was like One and Only Pamela. It was also Montage and a bunch of other resorts that all sourced their lettuce from here. But everybody got E. coli. I almost died. Like...
Oh my God.
Everyone in my house, thank God my parents have so many bathrooms in that house. Like if we didn't, I don't think we would have made it. But every single person in my family, like basically you're just like pooping yourself all day long for like a month straight. It's awful.
A month?
It's awful. Okay, so in my brother, he had the symptoms for the longest time, but he was telling me that he had symptoms for about a month. I had symptoms for about, 2 weeks, which is still an incredibly long time. And, my favorite part about this whole story is that like my brother lost 9 pounds. I lost 0.
The sick, twisted joke.
But yeah, so now like my dad actually keeps antibiotics in the house.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, because you can get them in Mexico without a prescription. So we are just like stocked in case this ever happens again. Because apparently if you take antibiotics really early on in the E. coli, as that all happens, but it really lessens the symptoms. So you get better a lot faster.
Yeah, I don't think that the benefits of drinking raw milk outweigh the horrors of what can happen if you drink bad raw milk. And the reason why we pasteurize milk is so that it can be distributed to grocery stores nationwide, so that it can ship from farm to grocery store. Because it's not like it just gets dropped off day of. Like if you drink raw milk from a cow that you're just milking right there, like sure, maybe, why not? But once you have to travel things, like bacteria grows. And it's just like no one wants to die from drinking milk. That just seems so bonkers to me.
Exactly. Like E. coli is no joke. Like, if you're old or if you have like a compromised immune system, you're donezo, right? Like it can be super, super dangerous for those populations. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not into unpasteurized things. Maybe I'll have like a nibble of cheese when I'm in France, but like really other than that, like I'm not trying to mess with it. And our last story is another brand getting in trouble, but it's Estée Lauder. They were just fined in Canada over environmental violations. So to break down what happened, Estée Lauder companies were fined 750,000 Canadian dollars after pleading guilty to violations of Canada's Environmental Protection Act. And the case involved a failure to disclose significant new activity as it related to regulated substances, specifically the ones found in PFAS or forever chemicals. We did a huge breakdown of like what PFAS are and what they actually do. But here, basically if you have them, you're just supposed to disclose them. But they did not disclose that it was found in quite a few of the types of eyeliners that Estée Lauder is using. And the PFAS in question here is a type of dimethicone, perfluoronormal. But, basically the courts over in Canada, they are ordering Estée Lauder to notify all of the shareholders of the conviction. And this is going to be quite disappointing for them because Estée Lauder has not had the best of rides lately. So it's just another thing to tack onto their shareholders to be upset about. And additionally, their name also has to be added under Canada's Environmental Offenders Registry.
This $750,000 fine is not that big of a fine for Estée Lauder, considering how large of a company it is. Actually, that's quite literally just a drop in the bucket for them. Like that is like, they can spend that in an hour at Estée Lauder. However, I think that the significance of the fact that they are getting fined is showing that environmental compliance is becoming a real financial and reputational risk for beauty companies. So these regulatory bodies, they're not just warning companies anymore. They're actually enforcing the laws. And so this can accelerate reformulation, transparency, and supply chain accountability across the industry.
And we've seen so many brands have to go in and reformulate because of all of these new laws against PFAS. Armani Luminous Silk had to reformulate their iconic formula, and we're going to see so many more kind of go down the line after this. But yeah, I totally agree that $750,000, especially because it's Canadian dollars. Let's not forget that. So it's not that much for an Estée Lauder, but I think it's really like, the big slap on the wrist here is having to tell all your shareholders.
All right, guys, that's a wrap for today's news roundup. Stay tuned next Monday for our weekly roundup of beauty, business, and pop culture news.
And we'll see you this Thursday for our deep dive chit chat episode.
See you guys next week.
Bye.